Subscribe now.
Hey guys, welcome to the Bigfoot Influencers Podcast. I'm Dana Halloran and this is Tim Halloran. And we're here today. We have a super exciting episode to share with you where we are interviewing David Ellis. So we're super excited to introduce you to him. He's definitely a Bigfoot influencer.
Definitely.
So we're going to bring him in. He's going to tell you who he is, how he influences the world of Bigfoot. And I guess we should just jump right into it.
Yeah, I will say he's one of the nicest people I've ever known, and he's humble, so he probably doesn't like to talk about himself too much, but we'll pull it out of him. We'll make it happen. So yeah. Let's bring David in.
Hey,
Hi guys, how are you?
Good. We're so excited to have you on the show.
Me too. I'm excited to be here.
Have you? Awesome.
Thank you.
Just thrilled, and thank you again for helping me and being part of the book. It was
I'm like you said, I'm very humbled. I would have never suspected it in a million years.
Oh, are you crazy? You're so important, dude. What are you talking about?
Oh gosh, here we go.
So I've always liked to usually get right into personal questions and stuff, but I think it's important to for us to obviously a lot of our regular Bigfoot people who listen to our show know who you are, but I also like to be sympathetic to those people who aren't very much involved in the Bigfoot world but are curious about the phenomenon. And so David, what can you tell us what makes you so interested in this subject?
Well, actually, there's been monkeys in the woods as far as my psyche goes since I was very small. My grandfather had a 80-acre farm near Battleground, Washington, and this happened maybe in the early 50s, late 40s. He was cutting hay, and he said up popped a 5-foot-tall monkey. And then it ran through the field, hopped the fence, and went into the woods. So since I've been about 5 or 6 years old, I've always had this notion that there's possibly monkeys in the woods. So, now that I'm older, I can look back on that. And of course, there weren't 5-foot-tall monkeys in Battleground, Washington. Right. But I was certainly aware of the lore. I grew up in the shadow of Mount St. Helens. So if you're familiar with the Ape Canyon story, that was known even back then. So when I was about 11 years old, we lived in the same area. We lived about 5 miles south from my grandfather's farm, out in the countryside. And there was a 40-acre cow pasture that a group of the neighbor kids would always go to have adventures and fun. And the field was littered with, it was an old forest, an old growth forest, and it had been cut using the old spring and buckboard method, which left these 12 to 15 foot tall edifices of stumps. And we called it the stump field. So we would go there for adventure, hide and seek, play games, all sorts of fun. And so this was about September of 1963. Yes, I'm that old. Anyway, we were, as a group, headed towards the fence line. And on the other side of the cow pasture fence was brush, tall alder trees, tall fir trees. It was just thick. You couldn't see into it. And the cows would walk along that edge as the vines and things grew over. They would munch on it and create this canopy. Well, one of the branches that was sticking out came off of a maple tree, and one of the guys picked up a stick, smacked the limb, and all heck broke loose. saw alder, maybe this 30-foot tall alder, and they just started swaying like this, and there was no wind, so they were swaying way too hard for any kind of a wind event. And that had my attention. Thought that was very strange. And then all of a sudden, at first I thought something had fallen out of the tree or trees, but actually limbs about 2 inches thick were being snapped off of the tree, and then it cut loose whatever it was with a 10 to 12 second vocalization that I described to my parents as a cross between a lion roaring, it had a deep component to it, and an elephant trumpet, it had a high component to it. So it was two sounds melded into one. And that pretty much knocked all of us to the ground. It was so loud. That was the other part of it. It was long and loud. It was not a cow. It was not a cougar. It was not a bear. It was, we didn't know what it was, but we knew we had to get out of there. So we ran. And then the interesting thing that got me really interested in Bigfoot was the following week, our librarian, we had a library class that was separate from our school classes. And so the librarian would ask if anything interesting happened to anybody over the weekend, hoping to find out what our interests were, and they could steer us to something that we might actually read. So I told my story, and about a half hour later, the librarian came up to me and tapped me on my shoulder and said, "I'd like to speak with you if you don't mind." So I went with her into a separate room, and she started asking questions about, well, could it have been a cow? Could it have been this? Could it have been that? And I said, no, it sounded like a lion roaring and an elephant trumpeting. And I know what both of those sound like because I've been to the Portland Zoo and heard them. So I was speaking from a place of knowing rather than guessing. And so she said, I have a book for you to read, and it's called Abominable Snowman, Legend Come to Life. And it was written by Ivan T. Sanderson. So that book talked about Bigfoot. And so I've kind of had an interest in it ever since, but not to I didn't really get into it until about 2005 when I went to a Bigfoot conference. I had looked at things on the internet, but it was that conference that really got things going for me.
So David, I want to go back to that original experience you had, if that's okay. So when you said twigs or branches were snapping, was that above you? Do you remember if it was?
Yeah, the limbs were about 10 to 12 feet off the ground that were being snapped off, off the alder trees. Yeah.
And how many friends were with you?
I don't know. I can't remember. It's been that long ago. There was probably 6 or 7 in our group.
That's crazy. And I think, I mean, you mentioned, you told me this story, and I learned something new every time I talk to you, which is so awesome. And I think it's 1963. So
yes,
I mean, the Patterson Gimlin Field was 1967. So not that things didn't happen before then. Obviously, Peter Byrne and some of those were already doing some things, but in 1963, I mean, I guess it wasn't even a big mainstream thing, right?
No, the book that the librarian had me read was published in 1961. So it had been barely out. For her to know about was kind of an incredible coincidence. Kind of makes you wonder what she knew.
Oh, yeah, definitely back at that time. Because again, who else? There wasn't much information out there, so
no.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think that the lion roaring thing kind of sticks out to me. I remember growing up as like a very small child, probably like from my birth age to 5 years old, we actually had a neighbor across the street that had a pet lion.
Oh boy.
And so when you would hear it roar, it literally would like vibrate in your
Right. Yeah.
in your torso, in the ground, even if it wasn't that loud.
Right.
So that's really interesting, the lion roaring thing. So, and then obviously, and we've all heard elephants trumpet, like you said, being at the zoo.
Right.
So it's almost like it's a sound that's kind of like vibrating inside of you, but you're being affected by it auditorially as well.
Right. Yeah, it was a
Which-
surreal experience.
We don't have anything in North America that does that.
No.
That we know of.
No. No.
We're not supposed to, at least.
Right.
Right.
So that's a really powerful story.
Well,
You know,
thank
everybody's like all into their eyewitness stories. But when you're like feeling something like a vibrating audio and hearing it at the same time, that's just as powerful in my opinion.
Well, also the length. That was, typically things don't vocalize for an extremely long time. There's only one recording that I'm aware of that comes close to it, and that was recorded by John Andrews. And I heard that at a conference in 2005. My kids were with me at the time, and I elbowed them and I said, "That's it. That was the vocalization right there." And
Wow.
and it like I said, it was about 12 seconds long.
So David, you have your experience as a 12-year-old.
Yes.
Okay. And so then you're telling us that the next time, like when you really started to get into your research, was 2005?
Well, that's when I decided that I needed to finally get into it. I've been following things on the internet, chat groups and things of that nature, and from afar.
Mm-hmm.
But I decided that I needed to delve into it in around 2005. And that was after going to a conference and met Dr. Meldrum, Dr. Bindernagel, and quite a few other researchers. And I found out that, hey, there's quite a bit of interest in this. So it's not just, a couple of people, looking into this. This is more of an organized search. So
you take it from that conference. You went to this conference. You were like, okay, I'm not the only crazy person that knows that there's something out there. There's actual like scientists and important people who are studying this phenomenon. So what was your next step after that?
Well, after that, I still was following things on the internet. And then I finally contacted a person that I met there. His name is Tom Yamarone. And
we've met Tom before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I asked Tom, I said, Tom, is there anybody up in Washington that I could maybe tag along going out into the woods? I really have this desire now to get out and about. And he gave me several names, and one of them was Christine Walls. And so I started a conversation with her. She was part of a group that they called, it was WOBFR, which stands for Washington Bigfoot Research Organization, like the BFRO.
Mm-hmm.
They were affiliated with the BFRO, but they were a Washington contingency. And so it was a great experience. I got to meet them, and they said, "Sure, we'll take you out." And from there, I got the access to BFRO through Christine as well, and started doing reports that would come into the BFRO. I would call up witnesses and talk to them. And I ended up being more of a long-term researcher. In other words, I didn't just go after stories. I would find a witness, and I stuck with that witness, because where we were going and what was happening was producing results. So my first recording was in 2007, and I can kind of tell you about that if you like.
We would like that. Yeah, tell us about that.
Okay. So I actually have to go back to 2006. This is December of 2006, and I went to a location that had been yielding results, and my kids gave me for Christmas gave me a bionic dish. It was an inexpensive, $50. I think it was called a spy-on device. So you couldn't actually hook it up to a recorder, or it wasn't hooked up to a recorder. Let's back that up because I eventually did. But what happened was we had an experience of wood knocking, and because I had this spy-on device, I could hear something flanking our position, and the other people in the group could not hear what I was hearing. So I knew that this was significant. So there was something that was wood knocking at our 12 o'clock, and then there was something that was flanking going around to our 3 o'clock, eventually got to our 12 o'clock. So we were sandwiched in between two things. Something that was wood knocking in front of us, drawing us towards it, and then something that was following behind us, which I thought was kind of interesting.
So you guys were moving though. You guys were walking as this was happening.
Well, we would walk and stop. And finally, though, the wood knocking got kind of a frantic tone to it. So we decided, maybe we're, this is fun, but maybe it's not so fun for them. Or what's on the other end of the wood knocking. So we went to another location. But what happened for me was, I still just have this story. And I wanted to take it beyond a story. I wanted somebody else to hear what I had just heard happening to me. Mm-hmm. So I went out and purchased a digital recorder, figured out how to hook up the spy-on device to the recorder and record as in real time as things happen. So 2 weeks later, I went back to that same location, and it ended up having a great wood knocking, and whatever it was not only wood knocking, but it was screaming too. So
were you by yourself, David?
No, I was with another witness, another researcher, Christine.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You were back with Christine. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we had, that was my very first field recording, and I had wood knocking and screams. I still have that. It's one of my favorite recordings.
Wow.
But
do we have that, Tim?
I'm not sure if David said
that.
No,
I don't think you do.
Okay.
David has I think last time you told me around 8,500 recordings that could potentially, that are interesting at least, or is it more than that now?
Those are clips. Yeah. The actual recordings, I have thousands of hours and have pared it down to some interesting clips, but yeah. And people will say, no, you can't have that many. Well, I have worked with people that had recorders going every night for years. So there was lots of audio that I would filter through to get those interesting clips.
So how do you, David, you normally do that? So that's what you call, working with a long-term witness?
Yes.
So how do you typically approach that with a witness, and how do you get that set up, and what do you guys do?
Well, everybody's different. Some people didn't want to do it. Some people did. So obviously I worked with the people that didn't want to do it.
What would you say about the people who didn't want to do it? What do you think their reasoning was?
Oh, it's a lot of work.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not. I tried to get it as easy as possible. Over the years, I
just like, whatever, I don't have time for it. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or there, there's something about drawing something to your house. It's I would always tell the people, look, I can get in my car and go home. You're home. So, be careful of what you're inviting to your home. You may think it's fun and games for a while, but then please make it stop.
Right. Yeah. You hear some stories about that. So going back to that, how do you approach that?
Well, I make sure that they really want to do it. Let them sleep on it before we entertain going forward. But usually there's with the people that I work with, there was lots of enthusiasm and a question wanting to know what's going on. It's like the rest of us. So, yeah, it was. Over the years I've worked with probably 20 to 30 different folks, and then I got known in the community, and people would send me things too. So I have audio from all over North America and a few clips from down under Australia.
So is that what you normally do? Do you normally go to the site, or you just walk them through it and have them set up an audio device?
Yeah. I want to find out where they are coming from. Most of them wanted to prove that they weren't there. And that was the good sign for me, when I would get a witness that was really questioning that they really were there. And I just want to know that is it a coyote? Is it, people? What, can we determine what's going on? And
basically, they wanted you to rule out the obvious suspects.
Right.
Okay.
So that was always one of the things that I look for. How enthusiastic were they? And then I would find things that they would not know about. They would say, "Oh, can you look for this particular scream?" But there were other things that I had in my bailiwick that I knew were associated with Bigfoot in traditional lore and other things. And there was things that I found from one place to the next. For instance, there's a thing that I call percussive voice, and that's where it has kind of a voice-like pattern or talking, but
like a language.
Yeah, but it's clicks and pops and huffs and grunts and moans and things all kind of intermixed.
Is it kind of like a Ron Moorhead kind of thing?
Scare
sounds?
No.
Okay.
It's something a little bit different, but I found it in too many different areas of interest to gloss over it. This had to be something that was going on. And then I came across Tilda. Tilda is a orangutan in a German zoo, and her handlers noticed that she was trying to use certain sounds for vowels and certain sounds for consonants, and she was using clicks and pops and tongue clicks and pops and things and huffs and grunts. And I thought, that's pretty interesting. We have something that really does do this. It's but we don't have orangutans in the Northwest.
So it's really interesting that you talk about the clicks.
Mm-hmm.
So I can remember seeing a story somewhere about a blind young man who was using clicks to kind of navigate his way, kind of like a dolphin.
It's called echolocation.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that has that might be something similar?
Oh, very possibly. Very possibly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe they can figure out exactly.
And he could literally walk around and click his mouth in a certain way where he, being with his keen hearing,
it'd reverberate off of a
and
building.
He could be able to walk around almost like a dolphin.
Would explain how they can get around easily in the woods at night.
Yeah. That's super interesting.
You two might be onto something, David.
Yeah.
You and Dana.
I don't know about me. I just watch stuff.
Yeah. No, it's your theory. It works.
But hey, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
Super interesting. Yeah, that
I
clicking
agree.
thing.
Right. So David, I want to, maybe we can talk to the audience a little bit about the tools that you use, because
Sure.
many of us, and like me, I mean, I was a fish out of water until you eloquently explained it to me. So, maybe start with recording devices. What do you normally suggest to use with recording devices? And then we can get into other tools.
Sure. Well, I first started out with that Spion device and had an Olympus. I don't think I
Because the
spent more than
Spion
50.
device, it's that thing that we saw like on infomercials. Where
Yeah,
you would
probably.
Be like, you'd be at the pool and you want to know what the person like 100 yards away was talking about, and you could like get
all the gossip.
No, seriously,
I know.
it was like an infomercial, and people were all like, "Oh, I wouldn't know what they're talking about." Okay, so that's what you're talking about. Basically.
Yeah, it was an inexpensive device. It lasted maybe 5 outings, and then fell apart.
Right, but it worked since 5 outings.
It wasn't rugged service duty equipment, but I did graduate to that. My next device was I think that's called a bionic dish, and I spent a couple $100 for that, and then I moved up to what is called a Dan Gibson. He is familiar or famous in the ornithology, birds. He would do recordings of birds and use the best equipment, and kind of invented a certain type of bionic dish, if you will. It was a larger
hone in on certain birds.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
The theory of a dish is that it as the area that you pointed will accumulate down to a finer pinpoint, and then using a specific microphone, or a good quality microphone that would capture the sounds. And
that's so important. That's so cool. Even like today, like if you're out in your backyard and you hear a certain bird and you're like, oh my God, I've never heard that sound before.
Right.
Like you can literally go on YouTube or Google, and this guy or other people like him are collecting all of this data from birds, not just obviously for amateur use, but also for scientific use.
You're describing a resource that I used that's called Macaulay Library of Sound. And they catalog all known animals, all reptiles, birds, mammals, everything that they can. And they have a digital file which shows a spectrogram, and I'll get into that a little bit later, which is a visual representation of the sound that's easy to identify. It's kind of like looking at a fingerprint.
Exactly.
So when you see this, how that sound looks or appears, it creates a visual representation that you can instantaneously see in a recording and go, that's a barred owl, for instance.
And thank you, because so I remember we were in our backyard and I was hearing a particular bird, and I kept on playing it, and Tim was like, stop messing with the birds, because I would play the sound and then the bird would call back. Yeah. And then remember it flew over? Yeah. It flew over to us. And Tim was like, why are you teasing them? I'm like, it's so cool how this works so well. Because sound is like a fingerprint. Right. Sound is like a visual. It's so unique. And I don't think people really understand that.
Well, it is when you put it through software that creates a spectrogram of the sound. The spectrogram is what we're discussing or talking about. And it takes a specific software, a specific type of software. There's many softwares that can change a digital file into a visual spectrogram. The one I use is Sonic Visualizer. It's freeware. So I kind of standardized on that. I started using that in 10,000 2010, rather. My mentor in the field of recording is a gentleman that goes by the name of Monongahela. You may have heard of him.
Mm-hmm.
I hope he becomes well known for you too. He walked me through the process of how to download Sonic Visualizer and kind of gave me some prep for it and how to work it and how to utilize it. But
so I'm sorry, David, why don't you tell everybody who, because, again, we want to like make sure that everybody who's watching understands who Monongahela is. Can you give us like a brief?
Sure. He's an investigator that works with the BFRO. He is a crypto linguist trained by the military, so he has more of an understanding of how to utilize and what the value of sounds are. So he really helped me quite a bit get going. I was the reason that our paths crossed is that some of the files that I had talked previously about, I had sent to him and said, what do you think's going on here? And so he had quite a bit of encouragement to me over the years, and I kept sending him things. And he, well, actually what happened is I started finding that it was taking an enormous amount of time to go through all of the audio that I was recording. I was recording 80, 90 hours a week, and it seems like it would take a 1-for-1. In other words, it would take another 80 or 90 hours to review what I had recorded. And he said, oh gosh, you got to start using a spectrogram to identify your sounds. And I found out that I could do it so much faster that way. I could take a 30-minute file and get it analyzed in 5 minutes rather than 30 minutes.
So why don't you tell everybody what a spectrogram is?
And while you do that, David, I'm going to bring an image up of it just for our viewing audience.
Okay.
Sure. It is a visual representation of all the sounds in the environment. And usually what you're trying to focus in on is a specific sound. On the left, you'll see numbers, and that's resonance in hertz. So the resonance in hertz that seems to be interesting or suspicious for the Bigfoot community is something in the area of 600 to 750 hertz. And so if you get your main fundamental, which is in the one that we're looking at here, it's the bottom vocalization, and anything above that is what's called a harmonic, which is a higher representation of the sound. So you start to learn to look for these specific clues, and when you find them, you go, aha, and then you listen a lot closer, and then if you deem that not to be a coyote, and what you do to make sure that it's not is compare it to real coyotes and see if the visual representation is a match, or if it's resonating in a lower hertz, which is maybe outside of coyotes' typical range. So there's
David, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Is it, because I know as humans, we have limited hearing capabilities compared to a lot of other animals. So are there things that you can see on the spectrogram that we can't hear as human beings?
Well, okay, so in our lower range, anything below 20 hertz is considered what's called infrasound.
Right.
Now, that ends up being more of a feeling or a pounding in your chest when you get, or something of that resonance is in your purview, in your area where
almost like the lion roar. That
right.
I might have heard the lion roar, but I also felt something in my torso.
Right, which you could not hear, but if there were microphones, and there are special microphones that can pick it up, and there are special recorders, but unfortunately, the digital recorders and the microphones that we utilize are tapped out at about 40 hertz, which is above the infrasound level. So infrasound doesn't just resonate at 20 hertz. I suspect that it also rises above the 40 hertz. And that's what people are recording and saying, I think I recorded some infrasound. Well, you probably didn't record infrasound, but you may have recorded something just above infrasound that's related to infrasound. It's part of the range of whatever is resonating in the infrasound range.
So do we have a device that can record infrasound?
There have been specialists that worked with marine for like whales. And then there was a specialist that I'm aware of that recorded elephants that was able to do it. But you have to create the equipment. It's not standard off the shelf. Go buy a digital recorder. The microphones aren't synced for 20 hertz. They have a cutoff too. It's like the manufacturer goes, why would I want to record something that we can't hear? So
on the spectrogram, basically everything you see on the spectrogram is something that the human ear can hear.
Most likely, yes.
Okay.
There's always a caveat, and Doug Hychek has a gentleman that he thinks may have actually recorded sound in that infrasound range through the use of a standard recorder. I guess I don't know how that happened, but he seems to think he did. So I every time you make an absolute statement, you have to back it up with maybe I'm wrong. So I'll admit that. But as far as I know what standard specs are for microphones and for digital recorders, and you typically can't record something that's less than those values. But what I'm saying is that maybe some of those infrasound also are combined with sounds that do get into the lower end. Now, what even exacerbates the situation is that there is a 0 on the spectrogram, and it'll have readings that go all the way down to 0. Now, I don't know if the spectrogram assumes something, because I know you're not recording down to 0. So there's something in there that I haven't quite grasped, so that I could say that the manufacturer is maybe 40 hertz is the 0 component, if you will.
Because they're assuming nothing's going to typically go.
Yeah,
below that, right?
you're down at the lowest threshold you can hear, which is 40 hertz or so, and then that becomes the 0.
What other professions? I mean, obviously we talked about anyone involved in wildlife or mammals or marine life. I mean, typically what professions use spectrograms?
I think they use it in court cases, and people that have way more knowledge than I do, that have way more capability than I do. I'm self-taught with the oversight of Monongahela. So there are people that know way more about the subject and have, I think, probably a software that's much better than the software that I use. So,
but what you can do with your software is you can rule out any known animal. You can quickly look at it.
Yeah, it's good.
And rule out what it isn't.
Right. It's good enough for that. Absolutely.
Because a spectrogram is basically it could be used as a fingerprint for
Right.
or a footprint or a paw print of any type of animal, because we all have our range, we all have our I mean, I think even with languages, even with the human languages, there are certain waves and sing-songy fashions in which each language occurs. So I think it's the same thing with animals.
Sure.
Do you guys want to share some audio?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really, I mean, so blessed that David did this. So what in the book we were able to use the QR code where the readers can actually access David's audio, and we have we have images to go along with the audio. So what we're looking at here is an audio. And David, you want to explain what this is? And I'll play the audio.
Okay. This is a recording that I captured in the eastern part of the Cascades. And it was after a group had call blasted, done their own vocalization, and we were a ridge over from them, maybe a mile apart. We didn't actually hear them vocalize, but we had our radios, so they would let us know we're going to vocalize, and then we would wait for a response. Well, this was a response to somebody's call blast, if you will. And it's 4 screams, but it's looped twice. So
they're going to hear the 4 screams 2 times.
You're going to hear the 4 screams 2 times, yeah.
Okay, here we go.
So David, from what we just heard and from this visualization that we have here with the spectrogram, what you can say to us is that is a call of something that we don't have documentation of.
Right. Yeah, that is not a coyote.
Okay. It's not a cougar. It's not a raccoon. It's not a fox.
No.
Okay.
To me, the tonality sounds human-like, but we know it wasn't a human.
Okay, but could a human do that?
I suppose.
Okay.
Yeah. But we know we know all the people that were in the area, and we know where the sounds came from, and they were not in a road. They were deep in the forest. So
and to be perfectly honest with you, it doesn't sound human.
No.
It doesn't sound like a human could do that.
Right. Yeah, there are voice actors that could possibly imitate it.
Mm-hmm.
But why would they be out in the woods with you?
First of all, if you heard what the call blast sounded like, it doesn't sound anything like what I recorded.
Okay.
So
the call blast was from a human.
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Trying to imitate what they think a Sasquatch vocalizes like, and it's typically not anything like it. But I don't want to embarrass people that try to imitate Bigfoot.
You won't get me trying.
I've done it.
She has.
Tim is always like, "Girl, what are you doing?"
Well, I have never been a fan of broadcasting. Other people are, because I don't know what we're saying. I don't know what we're communicating. I don't know if this type of a yell is an intimidating scenario, like calling somebody out.
Or a
we don't
mating
know
call,
Yeah,
God forbid.
Yeah, or a mating call, heaven
Definitely don't want a
forbid.
mating call.
Hey, what?
My mistake.
That wasn't me. That was him.
I was thinking something a little more human-like.
Yeah.
I would say that was David. It wasn't me.
Yeah.
So do you want to listen to the next one?
Yeah, let's listen to
Sure.
the next one.
Before we
Go
do,
ahead,
just maybe the caveat that if you didn't hear it very well, you may want to go back to the YouTube version of this and adjust your computer volume and headphones. So if
So you can really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. Yeah. Unfortunately, when we do these podcasts and YouTube, I'm not technically savvy enough, but getting the audio from the microphone to it doesn't come out as loud as we like it to. So thank you, David.
Yeah.
Is this the one we want to look at next?
We can.
No, well, let's do what you want to do, David.
No, I love this one.
Okay, cool. Let's do it then.
Yeah, but this was one of those that's maybe a little on the low end. So you're going to want to replay it to get the full gist of it. But this seemed to be two creatures going back and forth with one another, and there's some singing kind of components to it. And some very strange, odd sounds. And if you look at the collective of all the sounds, you go, "What the hell was that?"
Yeah. So we'll suggest to our audience, turn your volume up.
Yeah, go ahead and play it, Tim.
Hold on a second. Here we go. Wow, so it's almost...
It is.
Yeah.
It's weird. It kind of reminds me of like when you're watching like Italian soccer and they're all singing in the background like some kind of weird chant. Do you know what I'm talking about? They're like, hey,
I don't know if beer was involved or...
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like when you're watching, like right now the World Cup is going on and they all have like this. That's totally sing-songy. That is really, really cool.
That's one of the categories that I follow closely.
Yeah, that is super cool.
So what else do you want to... Is there anything else you want to mention about that?
No, let's move on. Maybe something a little more on the louder side.
How about the reindeer
that'll
howl?
work. Yeah, that'll work.
So do you want to set this up or you want to play it?
Sure. This was a audio recording that was captured on a cell phone, and I was able to enhance it so it was much louder. So just for the audience, if you get or if you hear something and you're astute enough to get your phone out and hit record, you may capture something that's worthwhile.
All right, here we go. So, David, I have a question on this, which is just amazing audio.
That's so super cool. That's definitely primate.
I mean, so what makes you, how can you rule everything else out when you hear that? I guess that's my question.
It's you have to look at a lot of audio from, what are the possibilities, and, you would go to wolf, canid, something in the, the dog category, and look at all of the things that are on file and see if any of the audio visuals match. And I could not find anything that matched with this. That doesn't mean, and this goes for all of the audio, it falls into a suspicious or super suspicious, and it's varying grades of suspiciousness. So this is, everything can be disproven, but at this point in time, it's still in the suspicious category.
Yeah, so I guess, I thought we were talking to someone else about this recently. I mean, maybe there's sounds that animals make, known animals that we don't know they can make those noises. I mean, is that possible?
It's possible.
Maybe a wolf
absolutely.
could make a noise that we never knew they could make, and we just
right.
So
I take part. It's where context plays a lot into it. The area that this was recorded, probably not wolves, but maybe that doesn't preclude somebody having a wolf hybrid of some sort.
Right.
That they own. But
yeah, but I mean, it would still be a dog.
Right.
It's still a canine.
Right.
So I mean, because basically this audio and these spectrogram images that you have are basically fingerprints.
Right.
Like you were saying before.
So if somebody out there can record a wolf or a dog hybrid wolf that makes this specific type of vocalization, get it recorded, we can then now compare the two. And if they are a match, then it's not. Then
you can say, okay, David, sorry, but that audio you have is not a Bigfoot. It's a wolf hybrid.
Right.
So here's a question for you, David, because I know, because I know you're all into your audio. Have you ever had a visual?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, 'cause I know you told us about your story of seeing the branches break and everything like that. Have you seen a Sasquatch?
I have 2 times with the use of a thermal device, and neither one of them had recording capabilities.
Okay.
But I saw one where some of the recordings that I've got come from this location. It was a well-known area that has yielded foot impressions. It has yielded audio. So anyway, I'm listening, and a fellow investigator that I'm with has his infrared, I believe it was, camera, but it was not hooked up to a recording device. Nothing was going to happen that night. He had convinced himself. Right. So why take the camera then? But anyway, so he's looking through the camera, and all of a sudden he goes, well, I can't say what he said, but that's
sure
that's a effing Sasquatch.
Yeah. Oh.
And so I was hearing things in the brush that were moving around, and also another person had their bionic dish, and they were hearing the same thing. Something was moving around, but whatever it was came forward to the point where my fellow investigator saw it. He saw the head, he saw the shoulders, he saw the arms, he saw the legs, and then he's standing next to me, and he goes, damn it, I'm not going to be the only one that sees this. Here, you look. And so he grabs my headphones and shoves the camera in front of my face. Well, of course, during that shuffle, it's gone. And then I said, Jim, it's gone. And he goes, no. And so I said, I'll just continue to wait a little longer. And then all of a sudden, I saw something moving incredibly fast. It was moving so fast, it looked like an old-time movie stop action.
Right.
Wow.
And the refresh rate on this device was 60 frames per second. So it was moving faster than that.
Wow.
And it came into view, and I said, that's a coyote, because it was down on all fours.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, oh, false alarm. And then it went behind a tree. And then the next thing I see is head and shoulders popping
Oh
out.
gosh.
And so I saw its whole head and a shoulder leaning out from a tree. Well, the next day we went back and measured the tree that it was standing next to that Jim saw, and it was 5.5 feet tall.
Okay.
So
That wasn't a coyote.
it wasn't a coyote.
No.
So my second situation, we were in an area where there have been quite a few visuals, but we were on a logging road, just stopped in one location, and all of a sudden I'm looking through the it's, I think it was a FLIR, but I can't tell you the model number.
Okay.
What is that?
FLIR is a brand of thermal imaging.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm looking at this blob of white, and it's behind some shrubbery, so that if you can envision dark shrubbery and bleeding through is this white, and I'm thinking that it's an elk laying down. Well, then it stood up, and it wasn't an elk laying down. Its head the size of a watermelon, and I'm guessing about 4 feet at the shoulders, and the shoulders were ridiculous. It looked like a cartoon. It looked like it had bowling balls for shoulders, and I could see it from its waist up.
Wow. How far away were you? Do you think, or estimate?
I think we did measure it, and I can't recollect, but it was more than 200 feet.
Okay.
That's
So
wild.
that's huge.
Yeah.
So here's an important question for you. This is something that we always ask our influencers is, what do you think Sasquatches are?
They're not human. They're not ape.
Okay. Okay. But do you think it's related to humans and apes?
Well, I take the foot as my prime example. Look at the foot of a Bigfoot. Does it look more like an ape, or does it look more like a human? It looks
more like a human.
Looks more like a human, but does it look like a human, or is
Not
it
exactly?
Like,
no,
not
right.
exactly.
It's got 5 toes, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's something in between, and I think that we're finding through, many different studies now that our human tree is more like a bush, and there's quite a few offshoots, and Sasquatch is just one of those offshoots. They're related to us, but to what extent, I can't tell you. It's interesting that the DNA comes back, that not every sample, but quite a few samples come back as, that's human contamination. Human.
Right. Yeah, that is.
Well, that's because they're not doing a deep enough dive to find out, what besides the few markers that you're testing for are hits. Maybe there's a certain category that we're not testing for that, and that's,
even like
I'm saying that with
chimpanzees share 99%, right?
something,
I think it's 98 or 97 or something like that.
A high number.
And chimpanzees are very different than us. They're not
Right.
bipedal. They're smaller.
Mhm.
So, a Sasquatch might actually be closer to us
Right.
in regards to DNA than even a chimpanzee.
So
Right.
David, based on your years and years and years of doing this, on a scale of 1 to 10, how certain are you that they exist, in your opinion?
Oh, I'm 100%.
Very cool. That's fine.
Yeah. There's something out there, because we can't find them. That always leaves the door open for skeptics. So, that's going to just be the way it is until that body gets found somewhere, somehow.
Right.
I love it. I'm fascinated with individuals like yourself that are, they know. And the fun thing about it for me is it doesn't matter to me what you believe, mm-hmm.
or, if you think it's crazy, that's fine. That's okay. This is my obsession. I can understand why.
You know
What's
Yeah.
You know what you know.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't really care what anybody else thinks.
Well, it's not
because-
that I don't care.
But you know what I mean. Like, you're
Yeah.
like, okay, you think I'm loony, you
Yeah.
think whatever, but you're
Yeah.
basically, I think what happens a lot, and I think that's been my whole mission with this, is to introduce this to people, because I run into people who think I'm crazy too, and I've never had a visual, I've never had an audio. We don't.
Yeah,
But
I
people
guess
are like, oh my God, is Bigfoot? How is Bigfoot so old? No, honey, there's not just one Bigfoot. Okay, there's not just one. There's like a whole bunch of them.
Oh,
but like, even
gosh.
your mom thought
I know,
that.
yeah.
You know, like I have like a girlfriend at work who's like, oh my God, you believe that Bigfoot's real? Where is he everywhere? I'm like, it's not just, isn't he? He's not just one.
It's
individual.
not only a he. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's, but once you start talking to people and start saying, they're like, oh my gosh, like really? And so that's why we love having people on like you, David, because
Thank you.
actually this has been an amazing podcast with David, because we've really delved into the whole audio thing, which is just another form of evidence, which I think is so important for people.
Well,
and
I think it's going to gain more steam. If you think about it, what are your chances of seeing a Bigfoot versus what are your chances of hearing a suspicious sound?
Exactly. 100%.
Probably. Yeah. Cause you can record up to 1.5 miles away. Well, you can't see that far as
especially in the woods.
Yeah.
Right.
So your chances grow exponentially and it's also a form of documentation. You have something that you and others can listen to and either agree or disagree with what you are hearing. And then that's where the spectrogram also takes over, is that you can delve a little deeper into a visual analysis as well as an audio analysis.
Right. And you can measure it, which is so important.
Right.
And which is scientific, because we need to look at this in a scientific way.
Right.
For sure.
That's my theory.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's been so awesome to have you on.
But before, one more question before you can let the audience know how they can keep up with you or the project you're working on. But last question, I promise. It's hard.
Okay.
What advice do you have for people who want to get into research? What do you where do they start?
Well, it starts with a lot of enthusiasm, and it starts with a lot of research. I would suggest doing as much research on the internet as possible. Read a lot of BFRO reports. Those are investigations that not everything gets reported on the BFRO webpage.
Most of it doesn't.
Most of it doesn't. So it's filtered. The information there is, enough to convince you that, after reading 500-600 of these, you go, gosh, I wonder, maybe there's something going on here. So if you're just getting into it, I would recommend starting there, and then read works by Dr. Jeff Meldrum. Anything you can get your hands on, whether it's his pamphlet on people just getting started, or his larger editions and books that he's written. But he's probably the man that has the most scientific credibility in the Bigfoot world. After you go through what he's done, what he's learned, and what he knows, it'd be hard to come away not thinking that really seriously hard about something odd is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Well, we just have to say, David, thank you so much for sharing
thank you.
your research and what you're doing. And this has definitely been like a refreshing new kind of podcast that we've done tonight with David.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and so it was really cool to have you on, and we really appreciate you taking the time to just
educate
us, educate everybody else out there about what you're doing. It would be awesome to have you back sometime, because 1 hour is certainly not enough with you.
I'd love to come back. Maybe we can get a few more audio things to play and pique people's
That would be
interest.
so super cool. And we look forward to one day meeting you in person.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, thank you.
That would be super cool. We're so far away from you, but who knows? Maybe we'll make it.
You never know.
I have a daughter.
I have a daughter in Ohio.
That's
Oh,
close enough.
okay.
Yeah,
That's enough for us.
You should
Yeah.
come.
You should come to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference.
we might have to do that.
Yeah, definitely. You
That would
should.
be super cool.
Yeah.
So how how can people keep up with you? Or I know you know the group you're part of. You can mention who you're part of. And
Sure. I'm a part of the olympicproject.com, and if you have something that you wish to send me, if you go onto the contacts page there and just send me an email, I'll get it. I'll respond.
And now,
So-
can people follow you on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter?
I don't know.
You're not a
They
social
can't.
media guru?
the Olympic Project.
I mean-
That's where you get hold of Dave.
Yeah. I try to keep a private life as well.
Okay.
I have a family that not everybody believes in what I do, so
Okay. So you're trying to keep a low profile.
yeah, I like to keep a lower
Stay on the
profile.
down low. Okay.
Yeah,
That's cool.
After 30 years of doing this, so yeah.
yeah.
Kind of hard to do when you're such a household
I
name in the
know,
Bigfoot world.
I know.
Well, cool, David.
Thanks again,
So,
David. We really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Oh,
We'll
I
talk to you
appreciate
guys
it.
soon.
You were awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye-bye.
All right. Bye. Oh my God. So that was
cool.
super cool.
Yeah, David's amazing.
Yeah,
He's
he
so
is
nice.
so cool because you know what? Like, I don't think we like really have delved so much. I mean, obviously we talked to Ron Moorhead, and got a little bit, and that was so cool to see our sounds. But I just think it was cool to have David on so he could explain how they're measuring things with the spectrogram and how you can see, like, you can literally look at one spectrogram image and another and be like, okay, that's not a coyote, that's not a cougar. And then that's a huge part of evidence,
Right.
not just
definitely.
a footprint or a video.
And
So-
and there's only a few of them out there doing it. David's got some of his friends and counterparts at that, but there's a small group of individuals doing audio. So it's just a whole nother level of collecting data and evidence. It's really cool. And David makes it so easy. He's like, because a guy like me that's not that smart when it comes.
You're smart.
Well, when it comes to things
Okay.
like that, I
Okay.
mean, but he just makes it easy to understand it. So I love it.
So we thank you guys for watching. We're our show is called the Bigfoot Influencers. We aren't the influencers, but we interview the influencers because we want you guys to see what everybody in the Bigfoot world is doing in regards to research and influencing the subject. So we really appreciate you guys watching, and you can follow us on Facebook. We're not like David Ellis. We actually are on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. And what else are we on? We're not on TikTok yet.
We do have a TikTok.
Oh,
It's
we
just-
do?
I just don't do anything on
Okay.
it. Yeah, I just created it to create it. But you can, just
Right.
Google search us. You can.
And then don't forget the book. So David Ellis is in the book too. So the book is really getting a little bit more into detail about who they are, their personal lives, what brought them into the world of Bigfoot. So you guys can get Tim's book now. You can get it actually on Amazon and Barnes and
You can
Noble.
get it everywhere. Yeah.
You can get it at the North American Bigfoot Center. You can get it at the Cryptozoology Museum in Maine.
Mhm. Sasquatch the Legend. They all have autograph copies. So
Yeah.
if you want an autograph copy, do that. And then when you're at conferences,
Yep. And I think the next conference we'll be at is the Ohio Bigfoot
I think
Conference in
so,
May.
yeah.
'Cause,
So we'll have
yeah.
some folks there that are in the
Mhm.
book. So while you're out there at the conference, get them to sign their chapter. You see David Ellis out there, have him sign
Yeah,
his
you're
chapter.
like, hey, David, I know you don't want to be famous, David, but I saw you on the Bigfoot Influencers podcast, and I want my autograph. So you can get him to sign his chapter too.
Yep. And that's it. Thanks,
Yep.
you guys.
Thanks, guys, so much
We
for
appreciate
listening
you.
to us. We do appreciate you.
Take care.
Bye.